Hi, I'm Eric Siegel with ericstrains.com and welcome to my 7th layout update video. It's mid-May 2011 and it's been a little over 6 months since my last update video. Now in the meantime, I've been doing my video blog series which shows some of the smaller stuff that happens on the layout in between these big update videos. So if you haven't checked out my video blog series, you can find it on my YouTube channel. Now, as I was planning this video, it occurred to me that it's been several years since I did a complete tour of the layout. And back then, the layout was much less developed than it is now. So in this video, I'm going to give you a complete tour and breakdown of the layout so you can see what's going on, where the layout is at now, and where it's going. Now, as you watch this video, bear in mind that this layout is still very much under construction and almost nothing on the layout is 100% complete. So you're going to have to use your imagination in some spots because in some parts of the layout, there's just track and nothing else. I'll do my best to try to explain what's going to be in those places, but bear in mind, it is under construction. This layout is very much a work in progress. Anyway, let's get started. Before I start the tour, I want to give you some facts on the layout. The name of the layout is the Appalachian and Western Railroad. It was started in January of 2007. That makes it about 4 years old at the time of this video. And I would like to have the layout mostly completed by around the end of 2013 or maybe 2014, but we'll see how that goes. Now this layout is a 3-rail O-scale layout. Some people also call that high rail. And basically what I'm striving for is scale realism while still having that third rail on the track. Now a lot of people ask me, Eric, if you want realism, why don't you go with 2-rail O-scale? And the answer to that is quite simple, and it's because I started off with 3-rail a long time ago, and that's all I've ever done, and I've bought all my stuff for 3-rail, so that's what I do. Now if I could go back in time and start over, I might do 2-rail, but I've always done 3-rail, that's what I know, and that's what I like. The layout is located in my basement, and my basement consists of 4 rooms, and the layout goes through all 4 rooms. I've cut holes in the walls so that the train can snake through all 4 rooms and go around the entire basement. Now, if you were to put the entire layout in one big room, it would be about 400 square feet or 20 by 20, and that's big, but there are certainly a lot of other layouts out there that are much larger. But the fact that the layout snakes through the entire basement makes it look a lot larger than it really is. The power for the track is supplied by 3 Lionel Powerhouse 180 watt power supplies and 1 MTH Z1000 100 watt power supply. Eventually I'm going to replace the Z1000 with another Lionel Powerhouse, so in the end I'll have 4 Lionel Powerhouses supplying all of the power for the track on the layout. These 4 power supplies are what are called bricks, and a brick is not a traditional transformer in that it does not have a throttle knob that allows you to control the amount of voltage that you're sending to the track, nor does it have a whistle or a horn button. All these bricks do is send a constant 18 volts of power to the track. Now the reason I can get away with that is because this is a digital command controlled layout. I'm using Legacy and DCS to control the trains, and so you don't need that throttle knob because it's the command system that's controlling the trains, not the voltage. Now you can certainly use a variable voltage transformer like a ZW or a Z4000, but on a digital layout it's simply overkill because you don't need that throttle knob. All you need is the raw power, and that's what these 4 power supplies do. They give me a constant 18 volts, and then the Legacy and DCS systems take it from there. When it comes to controlling the trains, I use Lionel's Legacy command system as well as MTH's digital command system, or DCS. I use the Legacy system to control my Lionel, Weaver, and Atlas engines, and I use DCS to control all of my MTH engines. I use both systems on the track at the same time. What happens is the power comes out of those 4 power supplies and goes into the 4 input channels of the MTH TIU, and then it comes out of the 4 output channels, and that's where the Legacy signal ties in, and then from there it goes out to the track, and that's all there is to it. All of the track, switches, and even the turntable on the layout are made by Atlas. The trains on my layout are a mixture of products from MTH, Lionel, Atlas, Weaver, and K-Line. Altogether, I've got a little over 500 items in my train collection. About 75 or 80 of those are engines or some sort of motive power, and then the rest is rolling stock. Now, of those 500 or so items, 55% are from MTH, about 20% are Lionel, around 15% are from Atlas, and about 10% are from Weaver. Now, if you're wondering what the most popular road name in my collection is, it's Union Pacific in first place, in second place is CSX, and in third place is Norfolk Southern. So that about covers all the facts on the layout. Now let's start with the tour. If we come down the stairs into my basement, it opens up into what's called the main room. And this is what the main room looks like. The main table over here is 25 by 8. There's an extension over here that's about 12 by 3. And then in the middle, there's a little section that's about 3 by 3. Throughout most of the layout, you're going to see these nice backdrops on the walls. These come from a company called Backdrop Warehouse, and you can get to them at www.backdropwarehouse.com. And the way they work is they come in sections, and you connect the sections together to form a complete panoramic image. Now for O-scale, those sections come in either 12 by 3 feet sections or 12 by 4 foot sections. On my layout, I'm using the 12 by 3 foot sections. But you basically put them up on the wall like you would wallpaper with wallpaper paste, and they form this nice panoramic image all around the layout, and they're really nice, as you can see. Now they are quite a pain in the butt to put up. They do take a long time. Probably one of the hardest things I've done on this layout was to put these backdrops up. But as you can see, it was well worth the effort because they look so great. Now these images are of the Appalachian Mountains in Virginia and North Carolina. But if you want something else for your layout, they have tons of scenes you can choose from. And of course, they also do their backdrops in other scales. So if you're doing HO or N scale, they have backdrops for those scales. So if you're interested, again, check out www.backdropwarehouse.com. Something else you're going to see plenty of on this layout are these mountains and tunnels. I make these using two products. One is a 2-part plastic casting resin, and the other is a 2-part polyurethane foam. Now, if you're interested in learning the entire process of how I make these mountains and tunnels, I made a complete tutorial DVD that documents the entire process from beginning to end. You can get that DVD for $20 at my online store at www.ericstrains.com/store. As far as scenery and ground cover on the layout goes, I get my stuff from 3 main sources. One is Woodland Scenics, another is Scenic Express, and the last is Brennan's Model Railroading. Now the ballast for the tracks is also made by Brennan's. It's called Brennan's Better Ballast, and in my opinion, it's the best O-scale ballast on the market. There are 2 levels of track on this layout. The second level is contained mostly in the main room, and you can see part of it from this angle. The second level is currently under construction. I'll get back to that towards the end of this tour. So for right now, let's focus on the main level. The main level of track consists of 3 loops on the main table, as well as a 4th loop that goes around the entire basement. And then in the middle of all those loops is the yard, which consists of the classification yard, the turntable, and the engine service area. This loop here is the inner loop. This is the yard lead. This is where the trains come into the yard, and then the cars go into the classification yard, and the engines go either to the turntable or the engine service area. This is the middle loop. This is just a simple loop that goes around the main table. And then this is the outer loop. This also goes around the main table, but there's a Y switch at the end that'll take the train around the entire basement and through the other rooms. When I hook the camera onto the car at the end of this tour and run it around the layout, that'll be on this outer loop, and you'll see the train go through all the other rooms. Now while I'm talking about loops, let's talk about curves. The minimum curve I use on this layout is 063. That's in the yard. The main lines use 072 or 081. This loop here uses 072, this outer one uses 081, and then in the other rooms of the layout, it's a mixture of 072 and 081. As I said, the inner loop here is the yard lead, and what happens is the train pulls onto the yard lead from the main line, and once the entire train is on the yard lead, the engine or engines separate and pull around the back side there and either park themselves in one of the turntable stalls or come on past that down to the engine service facility. Now that's when the switchers come into play, and the switchers take the cars on the train and drill them down into their classification tracks. This is the classification yard. There are 6 classification tracks, 5 main and 1 auxiliary. The total capacity of the yard is 38 cars. The turntable is made by Atlas O, and it is a functioning turntable. There are 15 engine stalls off of the turntable. Now up until a couple months ago there were only 14 stalls, but I was able to add one last stall back there for that little yellow trackmobile. And then there's a track that comes off the turntable here and comes over to the engine service facility. Now there's not much over here yet because I haven't built the structures yet, but where this Pan Am GP40 is going to be the fuel center where the engines can gas up and get a quick tune-up before they head out again. And then on those 2 tracks back there will be a diesel shed where they can get more serious work done. The thing I like about this yard is that it's designed to be a real working rail yard. You know, on some 3-rail layouts, there's a tendency to have a yard that's just there for show purposes, and it more or less becomes a storage place for cars and engines that aren't being used. But I wanted to have a real working yard on my layout, so I studied up on real rail yards and found out how they worked, and then I adapted that information to my layout because obviously I don't have enough space to have a full, complete, prototypical yard. But I was able to get all of the essentials in so that this works like a real yard. You can actually take apart and build trains just like the real railroads do. And I like that for two reasons. First of all, yards are just cool. But second of all, I'm a loop runner. I like to run my trains in loops, which is not very prototypical. We've got the third rail, which is not very prototypical. But having a yard that actually works is prototypical. And so in that way, my layout kind of has a best of both worlds situation where I have the fun of three rail where I can run my trains in loops and just kind of sit back and have fun. But I've got the yard there that actually works, so when I want to, I can build and take apart trains. And I like that. Now let's talk about the two mainline tracks on the main table. This middle line here is just a simple loop that goes around the main table. The outer line also goes around the main table, but then it also has this switch right here that takes the track off in this direction and takes the train through the other three rooms of the basement, and eventually later on down the line, it gives the train access to the upper level of track. Now if we back up here, the other purpose that this switch has is that it's one component in a large partially hidden Y that allows the trains to change directions. There's a switch right here. If you look down in the tunnel, there's another switch back there. I'm not sure if you can see it. And then there's another switch back there in that tunnel. And then going through this hillside is a straight stretch of track. And that forms a large Y that allows the trains to change directions. Anyway, we're going to follow this track. It's going to go through this tunnel here. And that tunnel wraps around this way and comes out over here. And the train wraps around here. Here we have an industrial siding. And there's going to be some sort of industry right there. I'm not sure what kind yet, maybe a drywall factory or something. And then the track goes through this tunnel and goes into the hallway room. On the other side of that tunnel, we come out into what's called the hallway room. And it's called the hallway room because it's built into the basement hallway. And the main function of this room is to connect the other three rooms of the layout. Now, as you can see, there's not a lot of room here for much action. But what room there was, I wanted to take full advantage of and have a lot of nice scenery as the train moved from one room to the other. So, as you can see, I've been doing a lot of scenic work in here, and this is actually the most complete looking area of the layout, although it's by no means 100% complete. But it is looking pretty good so far. Now actually, this has become one of my favorite areas of the layout because it's sort of the exact opposite of what most areas of the layout are, which is a lot of train action, sidings, factories, yards, all that stuff. This kind of represents the back country, where the train is just sort of passing through on the way to its final destination. And in the meantime, you've got all this nice backcountry scenery. If you look over here, this is one of the few spots on the layout where I've actually got some people. And that is my family on a backpacking trip. We like to do a lot of backpacking, and so I wanted to represent that on the layout somewhere, so there we are. There's me standing up, there's my wife building the fire, and my son is sitting next to her on that log. Now, normally when we go backpacking, we don't camp so close to the bears, but I had the bear figures from a previous project, and I decided to put them there just for a little bit of fun. But there we are. If we come down here, you can see I've got an abandoned section of track here. I've always been kind of fascinated with abandoned rail lines, and so I wanted to have one on my layout. Now, the story with this abandoned line is that originally the track came out of that tunnel like it does now, but instead of going through that tunnel, it continued on straight. But when they got down here, they realized that it wasn't going to be cost effective to go around the mountain, so they came back here and tore up the track, and then took the line through the mountain instead. So this is all that's left of that original track. Now, as you can see, it's looking pretty good. It's not 100% complete, but it is getting better with time. I'm putting more and more overgrowth on the track and more weathering, so it's looking pretty good. Up from the abandoned tracks, we've got some rock climbers up here. Now, right now, I've only got 2 of them, but eventually I'll probably have 5 or 6. I don't have them secured in place permanently. I'm still trying to see where they look good, but there's the rock climbers. Now, if you're wondering how the rock climbers get here, what they do is they walk down the abandoned rails, and then right about here, I'm going to have a set of stairs that'll take them up to this ledge, and then they can start rock climbing. Moving on from the rock climbers, here's the rest of the hallway room. Over here, we've got another tunnel. Going across the room, we've got a hinged lift bridge. And then over here, we've got some more track at the far side of the hallway room. Now, I'll get back to all this in just a minute, but for now, let's come back over here to our track and follow it through this tunnel into the back room. On the other end of that tunnel, we come out into what's called the back room. And it's called the back room because it's in the back of the basement, and I just don't have a better name for it yet. Now, as this room gets more complete, I will probably give it a better name, but for now I just call it the back room, and it consists of this table here, as well as these skinny tables that wrap around the outside edge. Now, I'll get back to these tables in just a minute, but for now, we're over here, and we just came out of this tunnel onto this little 5x6 table. Now, as you can see, there's not much going on here, and the main reason is because I have not installed the backdrops yet in the back room or the Colorado room, which you'll see in a minute. And until I install those backdrops, I can't do much scenic work. Now, I've been procrastinating installing those backdrops for a year or two now, but my main goal for 2011 is to get those backdrops installed before November. And then once they go up, I can start scenery work, and then this room will really start to come to life. Now, right here, we've got a little industrial siding, and there'll be some sort of industry here, and then the rest of the table will be a town with streets and buildings and people and so forth. So it should look pretty nice when it's all done. So now let's follow the track, and we'll go through this tunnel, which takes us back into the hallway room, and we come out of the tunnel there, and then we cross this lift bridge. The bridge itself is a single-track Pratt truss bridge made by Atlas O. That's the same company that makes the rest of my track and my layout. Now, what I needed was a bridge that would go across the hallway room, but that I could get out of the way when the trains weren't running so that I could get around the basement easily. So what I did is I installed hinges on this end of the bridge, and that way when I'm not running the trains, I just lift the bridge up and out of the way, just like that. And then when I am running the trains, I can bring it back down, it locks into place, and the trains go across without any problems. Now, in case you're wondering how I get power to the track on the bridge, it's really quite simple. The track on the bridge is just wired separately. What I did was I drilled a hole right here and ran up 2 feeder wires, and I soldered those wires right onto the rails, and then that wire just kind of hangs here loosely, and it just moves with the bridge as it hinges. It's really simple. Over here on the other side, all I did was create a notched area that's the same width as the bridge, and then I used some plastic shims here to make sure that the bridge lays down so that the track is nice and level every time. And that's all there is to it. These are the hinges on the bridge, and the secret to the hinges is to make sure that they are above the height of the rails. If you put the hinges below the height of the rails, what'll happen is when you lift the bridge, it'll bind up the track and it won't work right. But if you put the hinges above the rails, what happens is the track lifts up and away, and you don't get any track binding. Now again, this Atlas truss bridge did not come with these hinges. I had to install all this myself. If you want to learn how to do a hinged bridge like this, use the same resource I did. It's a DVD called Jim Barrett in the Back Shop Volume 11, and it's available through O-Gauge Railroading Magazine at www.ogaugerr.com. Moving on past the bridge, we go through this tunnel, which takes us through the wall, and then on the other side, we come out into what's called the Colorado room. It's called the Colorado room because it's going to be modeled after the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. Up on this masonite here is where the backdrops will be mounted later this year. The backdrops in this room will be of the Rocky Mountains, so it should look pretty sweet when it's all done. And of course, once the backdrops are installed, then I can start some serious scenery work in this room. Right here, I'm going to have a modified model of the Coors Brewery that's in Golden, Colorado. I've got quite a bit of Coors-related trains in my collection, and so I figured having the Coors Brewery on the layout would allow me to show off some of those Coors trains. If we move on over here, this track here is going to be in tunnels, and there will be mountains on top. And in the mountains, I'm going to be running a narrow gauge line. That's some of my narrow gauge equipment. It's Atlas HO track and Bachmann ON30 trains. ON30 is narrow gauge for O-scale. It's O-scale, so it can run alongside the big O-scale trains, but it's narrow gauge. And I'm going to be running that up in the mountains. It'll probably be a passenger train, sort of like those tourist excursion narrow gauge trains that they run in Colorado. And those will run up in the mountains, and that should be a lot of fun. Now, of course, they don't have TMCC or DCS for narrow gauge, so I will be using DCC to control those trains. If we keep following the track, you can see it splits off here. This track goes up this ramp to the second level of track that's in the main room. That second level is currently under construction. I'll get back to that in a minute. Down here is the main line that we were on, and if we follow that, it goes back into the hallway room across this narrow table. Right here, there are no backdrops, but this is going to be neat because the backdrops here are going to have a transition between the Rocky Mountains in this room and the Appalachian Mountains in that room, so it should be pretty neat when it's all done. If we come across here, this takes us back into the back room. And the track here snakes through here. This is going to be in a tunnel here, and that tunnel will go all the way around to about here, and the track comes out, And then we have this industrial siding with a yet-to-be-named industry. And then we follow the track this way, and it disappears into the darkness and goes through a really long tunnel before it comes back out in the main room. We're back in the Colorado room, and now we're going to follow this ramp up to the second level of track. Now the grade on this ramp is about 5 or 6%, which you would probably never see in the real world. But in model railroading, sometimes you have to bend the rules a little bit to make things work. And that's what I had to do because I just didn't have enough space to do a nice 2% grade. So the track rides up and then comes over the main line, wraps around here, and then goes along this ridge, and then goes through this tunnel and comes out in the main room. So let's go on the other side and take a look. So here we are on the other side of that tunnel. We're back in the main room, and this is the second level. The second level is about 11.5 inches off of the main level. It's not done yet. It's still under construction. The trains can ride up the ramp, but they have to stop about right here. Now at this switch, I have an industrial siding that comes off, and it comes across this really nice steel trestle. This is a custom-built steel trestle that was built by Stainless Unlimited. The guy who runs that is named James Bowerman. He's a great guy, and he did a bang-up job on this. It looks awesome. It didn't come painted. It was raw stainless steel when I got it, so I had to paint it, but it is just incredible. I'm going to be ordering more custom trestles from him in the future. I'll talk more about that in a couple minutes. Anyway, the siding comes over here, and the track ends here, and there will be a yet-to-be-named industry there at some point. If we move back over this way, we come back to that switch, and now let's follow the track this way. It wraps around the back side of the main room there. Now this track here and all the track that follows, it's laid down, it has power, but I haven't secured it in place, and I haven't ballasted it, so it's not suitable to run the trains on yet. But the track wraps around and then rides along that back ridge there, all the way across the main room, until we get to the other side of the room, and then the track wraps around, and right now it ends there. Now eventually the track is going to continue from there all the way back across here until it gets over here to meet with this track, which takes it back into the second level loop. Now you may be wondering, how am I going to get the track from all the way over there to here? Well, I'm going to have a 20-foot long steel trestle made by Stainless Unlimited. Now obviously I'm not going to order a 20-foot trestle all at once. I'm going to have him build it in 4 or 5 different sections. So it's going to take quite a while to build, probably a couple years, but it should be well worth it when it's done. In the meantime, I'm hoping I can build a temporary trestle out of some lumber, and that way, before all of the trestle work is complete, I can at least run the trains on this upper loop. So that concludes the tour of the layout. Now let's talk about some of my goals for the layout. For the past 2 years, I've participated in a tour of North Georgia layouts called the Piedmont Pilgrimage, and I'm slated to be on the 2011 Piedmont Pilgrimage probably sometime in November. And one of the things I like about being on the pilgrimage, other than it being a lot of fun, is that it gives me a goal to shoot for every year. You know, I've got that date hanging out there in November, and it makes me work all that much harder to get the layout as far as I can get it before people start showing up for the pilgrimage. And so with that in mind, I have 2 main goals this year before the pilgrimage. My primary goal is to have the backdrops completed in the back rooms. That'll be great, and I'll be really happy if I can give those up before the pilgrimage. And then my second goal is to have trains running on the second level. Now to make that happen, I will have to build that temporary trestle across the main table like I was talking about a minute ago. But if I can get that working, it'll add that much more wow factor to the layout when people come and see it. Anyway, that about wraps it up for this video. What I'm going to do now is hook a camera onto the front of the train and run it around the layout so you can see what the layout looks like from the train's point of view. I hope you enjoy it. I'm Eric Siegel, and I'll see you next time.
done. It's time to go to beans. NS300 out.